This is a political earthquake that Donald Trump cannot spin, cannot deny, and cannot survive. At 6:47 this morning, the Quinnipiac University Polling Institute released what insiders are already calling the most devastating state-level survey in modern American political history. And the target? Florida, the crown jewel of the Republican electoral map, the president's personal sanctuary. The state he claimed would be red for a generation. It's gone. But here's what the headlines aren't telling you. The top-line numbers are catastrophic, yes. But when you dig into the cross-tabulations, when you look at the demographic breakdowns that the mainstream media is too lazy or too scared to analyze, you realize something far more terrifying for the Republican Party. This isn't a temporary swing. This is a permanent realignment. The coalition that elected Donald Trump twice has shattered into 1,000 pieces, and there is no glue strong enough to put it back together before November. The Villages, the largest retirement community in America and the beating heart of MAGA country, has flipped. The Cuban exile community in Hialeah, the Venezuelan business owners in Doral, the evangelical MAGA church networks in Jacksonville, they are all walking away. And suburban mothers from Boca Raton to Clearwater, the voters who held their noses and pulled the lever for Trump because of the economy, they aren't just leaving the party, they are actively organizing against it. This morning, the lights inside Mar-a-Lago came on at 4:30 a.m., staff report shouting, "Phones being thrown." The president reportedly demanded to know who leaked the internal numbers that matched this public poll almost exactly. The answer, of course, is that nobody leaked anything. The numbers are real. The collapse is real. And for the first time in his political career, Donald Trump has nowhere to run. In this emergency analysis, we are going to do what no other outlet has the courage to do. First, we're going to dissect the poll itself, not just the horse race numbers, but the underlying data that reveals exactly which voters have abandoned Trump and why. Second, we're going to trace the economic catastrophe that turned Florida from a red fortress into a purple battleground in less than 90 days, because this isn't about tweets or scandals. This is about money, specifically. The money that is evaporating from the bank accounts of retired Trump voters as we speak. Third, we're going to expose the silence of Ron DeSantis, who is watching the president drown from the safety of the governor's mansion, while positioning himself as a lifeboat for a post-Trump Republican Party. And finally, we're going to examine what this means for the electoral map, because if Florida falls, the math doesn't just get difficult for Republicans, it becomes impossible. The fortress has been breached, the firewall has collapsed, and the flames are spreading faster than anyone in Washington wants to admit. Let's begin. Let me walk you through the numbers that have Republican strategists reaching for the Xanax this morning. The Quinnipiac survey polled 2,847 likely voters across all 6 to 7 Florida counties between January 19th and January 24th. The margin of error is plus or minus 1.8 percentage points. This is not some fly-by-night online panel. This is the gold standard of American polling. The same organization that correctly predicted Florida within 1 point in both 2020 and 2024. The headline number, Donald Trump's job approval in Florida has collapsed to 41%. Disapproval stands at 56%. For context, when Trump left office in January 2021, his Florida approval rating was 52%. When he won the state in November 2024, exit polls showed 54% of Floridians viewed him favorably. He has lost 13 points in his own backyard in less than a year. But here's where it gets worse. The generic ballot test, would you vote for Trump or a Democratic candidate for president, shows the Democrat leading 47 to 43. A 4-point deficit in a state Trump won by 5 points 14 months ago. That's a 9-point swing. In political terms, that's not a shift. That's a revolution. Now, let's break down the demographics, because this is where the real story emerges. The senior collapse. Voters aged 65 and older have been the backbone of Republican victories in Florida for decades. They vote at higher rates than any other age group. They are disproportionately white, disproportionately homeowners, and disproportionately conservative in 2024. Trump won this demographic by 11 points. Today, he's losing it by 6. That is a 17-point swing among the most reliable voters in the state. And we know exactly why. These are fixed-income retirees who moved to Florida for affordable living, predictable weather, and financial security. In the past 6 months, they have watched their property insurance premiums triple. They have watched their grocery bills increase by 23% due to tariff-driven inflation. They have watched their investment portfolios crater. As global markets retaliate against American economic aggression, they didn't sign up for this. They signed up for mean tweets and liberal tears. Instead, they got economic warfare that is destroying their retirement, the suburban women exodus. In the I-4 corridor, the swing region stretching from Tampa through Orlando to Daytona Beach, Independent women have shifted 19 points toward Democrats since October. 19 points. Focus groups conducted by Republican pollsters, leaked to several outlets this week, reveal the driving factor: fear. These are mothers who watch the administration deploy federal agents against protesters. They watch the footage of that nurse in Minneapolis. They are reading stories about schools being defunded and libraries being closed. They look at their children and they feel, for the first time, genuinely afraid of their own government. The culture war worked when it was abstract, when it was about pronouns and critical race theory and drag queens in distant cities. But now the culture war has come home. Now it's federal agents in American streets. Now it's their neighbors being detained. Now it's their friends losing jobs because of loyalty tests. Suburban women are pragmatic voters. They will tolerate a lot of chaos if the economy is strong and their families are safe. The economy is collapsing. Their families don't feel safe. And they are done. The Latino fracture. This is a finding that should terrify Republican strategists more than any other. Donald Trump won 58% of Florida as Hispanic vote in 2024. This was the culmination of a decade-long project to flip Cuban Americans, Venezuelan Americans, and Colombian Americans into reliable Republican voters using the specter of socialism. Today, Trump's Hispanic support in Florida has fallen to 44%. The socialism argument has stopped working. Why? Because these voters are small business owners. They run restaurants and import-export companies and construction firms. They understand economics at a granular level, and they can see, with their own eyes, that Trump's tariffs are destroying their supply chains. They can see that the trade wars have made it impossible to import goods from Latin America. They can see that their revenues are down 30, 40, 50% while the president tweets about Greenland. The Venezuelan community in Doral, once Trump's most passionate supporters, are particularly furious. Yes, the administration helped remove Maduro, but the aftermath has been chaos, civil war, refugee waves, and economic sanctions that have devastated their remittance networks. These families depend on to support relatives back home. They wanted liberation for Venezuela. They got a humanitarian catastrophe and a 40% decline in their small business revenues. The trade was not worth it, and they are expressing that at the ballot box. To understand why these numbers move so fast, you have to understand the financial hurricane that has hit Florida in the past 60 days. It starts, believe it or not, in Tokyo. 3 weeks ago, the Bank of Japan made a surprise announcement. They would no longer artificially suppress long-term interest rates. This triggered the largest single-day move in Japanese government bonds in 30 years. Global investors panicked. And because the modern financial system is a spider web of interconnected obligations, that panic spread everywhere, including to a place most Americans have never heard of: the reinsurance market. Here's how it works. When you buy homeowners insurance in Florida, you're buying it from a company like Citizens or Universal or Federated National. But those companies don't actually hold the risk themselves. They purchase backup reinsurance from massive global firms, many of which are based in Europe and Japan. When the Japanese bond market collapsed, those reinsurance firms lost billions in collateral value overnight. They immediately sent margin calls to their American clients: post more cash, or we cancel your coverage. The Florida insurers didn't have the cash. In the past 2 weeks, 6 Florida property insurance companies have declared insolvency. 4 more are expected to follow by the end of the month. This has left approximately 600,000 Florida homeowners suddenly uninsured, or facing force-placed policies from their mortgage lenders at 3 to 4 times the normal premium. Imagine you're a 72-year-old retiree in Cape Coral. You've been paying $1,800 a year for property insurance. Suddenly your insurer goes bankrupt. Your mortgage company force-places a policy at $7,200 a year. Your monthly payment jumps by $450 on a fixed income of Social Security and a modest pension. That's not an inconvenience. That's a catastrophe. Now multiply that by 600,000 households. This is not a future problem. This is happening right now. Cancellation notices are landing in mailboxes from Pensacola to Key West. Seniors are calling their children in Ohio and Pennsylvania, asking if they can move in because they can't afford to stay in their Florida homes. And here's the thing, Donald Trump cannot fix this. There is no executive order that lowers insurance premiums. There is no tariff that stabilizes the Japanese bond market. There is no tweet that makes reinsurance companies whole. The free market that Republicans worship is devouring their own voters. And those voters are finally connecting the dots. But the single-family home crisis is only half the story. Florida has more condominium units than any other state in America, and the condo market is experiencing a collapse that will reshape the state's political landscape for a generation. It started with tragedy. In June 2021, the Champlain Tower South building in Surfside collapsed, killing 98 people. Investigations revealed decades of deferred maintenance, inadequate reserves, and lax oversight. In response, the Florida legislature passed SB 4D, requiring all condominium buildings over 3 stories to undergo milestone structural inspections and to fully fund their reserve accounts. For future repairs, the deadline for compliance was December 31, 2025. That deadline has passed and the results are catastrophic. Thousands of condo associations across South Florida have discovered that they need tens of millions of dollars for concrete restoration, electrical upgrades, and structural repairs. These costs are being passed directly to unit owners in the form of special assessments. We're talking about retired school teachers receiving bills for $80,000. We're talking about widows on Social Security being told they owe $120,000 or face foreclosure. We're talking about life savings being wiped out by a single piece of mail. The insurance crisis made it worse. Condo associations must carry master policies for the entire building. Those premiums have increased by 300 to 400% in the past year. Condo fees that were $400 a month are now $1,000 to $100 a month. The result? A selling frenzy with no buyers. Condo listings in Miami-Dade County have increased by 380% since September. Prices are in freefall. Units that sold for $500,000 2 years ago are listed at $275. Zero with no offers. The wealth that Florida retirees spent their entire lives accumulating is evaporating in real time. These are Trump voters. These are the people who put Trump flags on their balconies and attended boat parades in his honor. They believed him when he said the economy was strong. They believed him when he said he would protect them. Now they're facing homelessness. And they are angry, not at Democrats, not at the media, at him. The poll numbers reflect this. Among Florida voters who own condominiums, Trump's approval rating is 29%. 29%. That's not a political problem. That's an extinction level event for Republican chances in the state. So where is the cavalry? Where is Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, the man who was supposed to be Trump's heir apparent, the fighter who never backs down? He's hiding. In the past 2 weeks, as the insurance crisis has exploded, as the condo market has collapsed, as seniors have flooded legislative offices begging for help, Ron DeSantis has made exactly 0 public statements about the president or the federal government's role in this crisis. This is not an accident. This is a calculation. DeSantis is term limited. He cannot run for governor again. His entire political future depends on the 2028 presidential race. And the internal polling his team is seeing, polling that mirrors the Quinnipiac results, tells him something very clearly. Donald Trump is an anchor, and anyone who chains themselves to him will sink. Sources in Tallahassee describe a governor who is quietly gleeful about Trump's Florida collapse. DeSantis' political operation is already reaching out to major Republican donors, positioning him as a competent alternative who can actually win general elections. His wife, Casey DeSantis, who is rumored to be considering a run for Senate or governor of another state, is even more aggressive in distancing the family brand from Trump. The DeSantis team sees an opportunity if Trump craters in Florida. If Republicans lose the state in 2026 and 2028, DeSantis can say, "I tried to warn them. I represented a different path." The voters rejected the chaos, not conservatism. It's a cynical calculation, but it's also a rational one. Meanwhile, Florida Republicans in competitive districts are scrubbing Trump from their campaign materials. Sheriffs and mayors who appeared at Trump rallies 18 months ago are suddenly unavailable for comment. The party apparatus, sensing the wave that is coming, is trying to save itself, even if that means letting the president drown. This is a great betrayal. Trump gave DeSantis his career. Trump endorsed him in 2018, turning a little-known congressman into the governor of the 3rd largest state in America. And now, when Trump needs allies most, DeSantis is measuring the drapes in the Oval Office and waiting for the funeral. Let's be very clear about what Florida falling means for the national map. Florida has 30 electoral votes. In 2024, Trump won 312 electoral votes to the Democratic candidates to 126. If you flip Florida, that margin shrinks to 282 to 256. But Florida doesn't exist in isolation. The same economic forces destroying Trump's numbers in Florida are present in every swing state. The tariff inflation is hitting Pennsylvania factory workers. The investment losses are hitting Arizona retirees. The insurance chaos is spreading to Louisiana and Texas. If Trump is down 4 in Florida, the models suggest he's down 6 to 8 in Michigan and Pennsylvania. He's down 4 to 5 in Wisconsin. He's down 3 in Arizona. Georgia becomes a pure toss-up. Suddenly, the electoral math doesn't just favor Democrats. It becomes nearly impossible for Trump to reach 170 electoral votes. Republican strategists have a term for this, the Florida domino. The theory is that Florida is always the first state to move because of its unique combination of demographics: large senior population, diverse Latino community, massive suburban sprawl. When Florida moves, it signals that the same movement is happening everywhere. Just with a slight delay, the Florida domino has fallen, and the rest are beginning to wobble. Let me get granular on why the insurance crisis cannot be solved. Why Citizens Property Insurance, Florida's state-backed insurer of last resort, currently holds policies for 1.4 million Florida homes. It is, by far, the largest property insurer in the state, and it is facing a mathematical impossibility. Citizens relies on catastrophe bonds, financial instruments sold to global investors, who bet against Florida hurricanes to cover its exposure. In a normal year, Citizens can sell $2 to $3 billion in cat bonds to transfer risk off its books. This year, the cat bond market for Florida is functionally closed, because the same global investors who buy these bonds, Japanese pension funds, European hedge funds, sovereign wealth funds, are the same investors who are boycotting American assets in retaliation for Trump's trade wars. They don't want exposure to American risk, they don't trust American stability, and they certainly don't want to bet on Florida hurricanes. When the American government is unpredictable, without the cat bond market, Citizens cannot transfer its hurricane risk. This means the state of Florida, meaning Florida taxpayers, is directly exposed to any major storm. The actuaries have run the models. A category for hurricane hitting Miami in the 2026 season would create insurance claims exceeding $90 billion. Citizens would collapse. The state's emergency funds would be wiped out. Florida would need a federal bailout larger than the one that saved the auto industry in 2009. And who would Florida be asking for that bailout? A federal government currently paralyzed by a debt ceiling crisis that Trump's own party created. This is a trap, there is no escape. Finally, we need to talk about what Florida means to Donald Trump personally, because this isn't just about electoral votes. This is about identity. Donald Trump moved his official residence from New York to Florida in 2019. He chose Florida because New York rejected him, the prosecutors, the press, the society that had mocked him for decades. Florida was supposed to be different. Florida was supposed to be home. Mar-a-Lago isn't just a residence, it's a symbol. It's the place where Trump holds court, where he receives supplicants, where he plays golf and feels like a king. To lose Florida is to lose that sanctuary. Think about his options now. He can't return to Trump Tower. There are ongoing legal proceedings and asset seizures in New York. He can't retreat to Bedminster. It's January, and the property is cold and empty. The White House is surrounded by protesters, and now Florida, his refuge, has turned against him. He's a man without a home, a president without a base, a king without a kingdom. The psychological weight of this rejection should not be underestimated. Trump's entire self-image is built on being loved, being the winner, being the man everyone wants to be or be with. To be rejected by New York was painful but expected. To be rejected by Florida, his chosen home. His MAGA paradise is a narcissistic injury of the highest order. Aides describe a president who is unraveling. He spends hours watching cable news, then screaming at staff about the coverage. He has canceled multiple public events, claiming scheduling conflicts but actually afraid of small crowds and hostile questions. He is calling Republican governors at midnight, demanding shows of loyalty that fewer and fewer are willing to provide. The man who branded himself as a winner is watching himself become a loser, and he has no idea how to stop it. The shock poll from Florida is not an outlier. It is not fake news. It is not a Democratic conspiracy. It is the sound of a political coalition collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. Donald Trump promised his voters that they could have tax cuts without consequences, trade wars without costs, and chaos without casualties. For years, he delivered on that illusion. The stock market rose. The cultural battles were entertaining. The liberals were crying. But reality always wins in the end. The seniors in the villages are not voting on pronouns anymore. They are voting on whether they can afford their insulin and their property insurance. The suburban mothers in Tampa are not voting on critical race theory. They are voting on whether their children will grow up in a functioning democracy. The Venezuelan entrepreneurs in Doral are not voting on socialism. They are voting on whether their businesses will survive another year of economic warfare. Florida was supposed to be the fortress. It was supposed to be the proof that the Trump coalition was durable, expandable, permanent. Instead, it is the proof that everything built on lies eventually crumbles. As the sun sets over Mar-a-Lago tonight, the mood is grim. The donors have stopped calling. The governor won't return messages. The voters are hanging up. Florida has awakened, and Donald Trump is alone, subscribe and turn on notifications. We will be providing live updates as the Florida legislature considers emergency sessions this weekend. The insurance crisis is accelerating by the hour. If you found this analysis valuable, share it with someone who needs to understand what's really happening, not the spin, not the talking points, but the data. The fortress has fallen, the firewall is gone, and the reckoning has begun. Stay tuned.